It was after it had remained in this condition for several months that Signora Spadoglia, whose evening cooking of spaghetti, macaroni, and other cereal edibles, beloved of the Italian palate, was famed from Soho to Clerkenwell, had a great idea, upon which she consulted the Soho-born Inspector MacCarthy. She had been, she informed him, a saving woman, whose personal wants were few. To her had come the idea of redecorating the pin-table blot upon the Sohoan landscape and opening it as a cafe for the respectable tradesmen of the neighbourhood, where cooking of the best and wines of a sound quality would be procurable at a price to suit the pockets of her neighbours. MacCarthy hailed the idea with enthusiasm, interviewed the landlord upon the signora's behalf, and knocked the rent down by nearly 50%. After expatiating at some length to that gentleman upon what a splendid thing it would be for him to realize that he owned at least one piece of property which the police would unhesitatingly class as eminently respectable. So very different to the rest of his possessions in the quarter, which authority regulated to a totally different class, and which might quite easily become the object of unheralded police investigation at any moment. The inspector's argument worked like a charm, and less than 1 month from that conversation, all traces of the disreputable pin-table dive had disappeared, and the Cafe Milano, Lucia Spadoglia Limited, opened its hospitable doors. But there was one fly in the signora's ointment, although the knowledgeable inspector had foreseen it. The erstwhile patrons of the pin-tables saw in the signora's enterprise a magnificent opportunity for free and unlimited meals. Here was an establishment which to them was a manna from heaven. Only a woman in charge, not even a doorman to be dealt with, though he would promptly have been given the broken glass treatment had he shown any sign of obstreperousness. Upon the opening night, the boys were there in full strength, and soon were well under way. The respectable patrons present to honour the occasion looked askance. Some stole quietly away before the trouble started. The signora, as became a woman of courage and enterprise, faced it all without the move of a muscle. Then suddenly arrived a supper party of 16, headed by patron number 1, Detective Inspector MacCarthy. His guests were composed entirely of units of the personnel of New Scotland Yard, and a hard, splendidly conditioned lot they looked. The fall of a pin would have sounded like a thud in the silence, which reigned as the inspector and his party took their seats at 2 tables reserved for them nearby the cash desk at which the signora presided. The gang, being at that time under the leadership of the well-known and rightly feared Mo Eberstein, the inspector invited that gentleman into an adjacent room for a few words. What exactly transpired has never to this day been made public by either party, but the appearance of the gang boss suggested that he had not seen eye to eye with the inspector. Both his were bung tight, and rapidly assuming all the colours of the spectrum, as MacCarthy guided him to the door. The rest of his not really pleasant features were quite unrecognisable. Before midnight, the word had fairly swept through Soho that any member of the gangs who so much as looked cock-eyed at the exterior of the Cafe Milano, let alone the inside, could prepare for personal trouble from Detective Inspector MacCarthy, and in large and ever-increasing doses. It was plenty. From that night the enterprise of the signora had never looked back. For some 20 minutes now the inspector had been waiting the coming of the person with whom he had a supper appointment, and had spent that interval studying the patrons, regular and casual. Of the former, there were fewer than usual, since nowadays Soho does not live over its places of business to the extent as of yore, and the tendency of the blackout was to send suburban dwellers home at the earliest possible moment. Nor was the casual trade improved by the necessary gloom to get through Soho streets from either Oxford Street or Shaftesbury.